Hey, what's up everybody? David Draftbit, and we've added a timer component, so I'm going to show you how that works. Opening up the drawer here, I've already got it in my recently used, but you can search for it as well. Timer component. I'm going to select that, and I've already got it centered on my screen so you can see it nicely. Over here in the styles tab, most of the styles for text component are here, so you have complete control over the typography and some margins and padding. So I can select one of these Google fonts, just pick something at random, and I'll crank up the size here so you can see it. And maybe give it a new color. You can use your brand colors or you can use the base palette colors, whatever you like. Cool. All right. So let's talk about how to make this work. We'll go over to Configs tab. There's a few options here. There's a update interval. So this is going to be how frequently the timer updates in milliseconds. So 1000 milliseconds is going to be 1 second. That means that it will update the timer every 1 second. You can change that to be whatever works for you, down to the 1 millisecond. Display format, by default, it's minutes and seconds, but you can change it to hours, minutes, seconds, milliseconds, or minutes, seconds, milliseconds, seconds, milliseconds. Lots of different options there for you. And then finally, you can change the direction from the default, which is count up, to count down if you need to count down as well. All right, so let's talk about the next set of props in the data tab. There's two of them here, one for initial time and one for end time. So depending on which direction you're going, these will be used. If you're counting up, then the initial time will be the lower time. So in this case, I'm going to start with 0, and I want to count up to 10 seconds, which would be 10,000 milliseconds. And then the next thing we need to do is make it work. So by default, you can see here, it's not going to actually do anything. We've got some new actions though that we can apply to buttons or any trigger really that you have where you want to control the timer. You can do that. So I'm going to add a view, and then I'm going to add a few icon buttons here in my view. Make my view a row so they're in line, and give them some gap between them. Okay, let's just customize these really quick. I can select an icon here. One's going to be play. So we have actions to start the timer, stop the timer, and reset the timer. And so that's what my 3 buttons are going to do. I'm going to have play here. And for this one, I'll have stop. And for the last one, excuse me, I'm going to have some kind of like back arrow, refresh, rewind, reload, something like that. Okay, now we've got our buttons. Let me show you here in line. I've got this first one selected. Coming over to the interactions tab, on press, if I search in my actions here for timer, you can see these 3 new actions, and I'm going to drag over that start timer and select my timer component. I've only got one on the screen, but if you have multiple on the screen, then you can select whichever specific one you want to control there. And I'll close that out. Switch over to this one here. On press, again, I'm going to search for my timer, add that in, select my timer here, and then last, it's going to be that reset timer, so I'll add that, select my timer. Here you can pass it a value to go back to if you want to reset it to a specific value other than the initial value that you set earlier in the data props. Here, I'll just leave it for the default. Now, switching over into our preview, click play. You can see this counts all the way up to 10, and then it'll stop. And I can reset that back if I want. Now, what if you want to do something when the timer is running, though? There's two triggers on the timer in the Interactions tab, one for on timer changed and one for on timer end. So on timer change, this is going to fire according to this update interval. So whatever frequency you have this update value set to is how often that this on timer change is going to fire. So right now I've got it set to 1 second, so it's going to fire every second. If you have that set to every 10 seconds, it'll fire it every 10 seconds and so on. So in this case, on timer change, I can just do a console log. And we do have access to that new timer value. So under action data here in the dropdown, I can select new timer value and just that'll console log that value as it updates. We can put that here. I'll show you in a second. The next thing I want to do is on timer end, so I can take action here as well. And for this case, I'll just show an alert, but obviously you could do whatever you needed to do with any of the actions. In this case, I'll just say time's up. Close that out. Okay, let's take a look at this now. If I hit play, I've got my timer going. I've got my console log updating on change. And then once this hits 10, I should get a nice alert telling me that my time's up. Okay, cool. So that's working well. We can also go the other direction, right? So we've got this count prop here in configs tab. If I switch that to down, now I can count down. Obviously, you're going to want to reconfigure your initial and end times to be appropriate. So in this case, I'll set my end time to be 10 seconds and my initial time to be 10 seconds and my end time to be 0. So this will start the countdown at 10 seconds and it will end at 0. And while we're at it, why don't we just switch this over to seconds and milliseconds and we can get an idea of how that looks on this second. And actually, let's just do this too. We'll update this interval to be half a second. All right, let's take a look at this. So you can see this milliseconds is showing us updated. We've got our value being logged every half a second, and then our time's up when we reach 0. And then we can reset this as it's going. We can stop it. Oh, my little stop button's not working. I think I've got something weird going with my screen reader. Sorry, my screen recorder. But you can reset that timer, start it again. So anyway, that is a quick look at the new timer components. I think I covered everything important. So yeah, hope you enjoy it.